Hi, my name is Mike Bedics, Director of the Office of Worship and Christian Initiation here in the Diocese of Camden. I'm here to speak to you about liturgy in Lent. And in this short 3 to 5 minutes, the best I think I can do is to answer the frequently asked questions given to me by Jose. Those 4 questions are: why the color purple during Lent? Why no flowers during Lent? Why is the music so different? Why does it have such a more solemn character during Lent? And then finally, why are the statues and images possibly covered in your church during Lent? So why the color purple? First, the current ritual books, our missal, our current translation actually uses the word violet. So I'll be using the word violet for this color because that's our current translation. We see this color in Advent and in Lent, and it reminds us that these seasons have a penitential character. Purple also reminds us of royalty. It has a very solemn character. Purple was a difficult color to make years ago when cultures and societies first started dyeing fabrics. It was a difficult process, and it was an expensive process. So only royalty wore the color purple. The soldiers during Jesus' trial clothed him in a purple garment when they placed a crown of thorns upon his head, mocking his supposed claim to royalty as they saw it. That can be a potent reminder for us of the juxtaposition of the penitential nature of the color violet and the royalty that comes along with the color violet. When the church sees a purple vestment, we know that we're dealing with a penitential character. Purple can also be worn any time of year during a funeral mass, or a mass or a memorial mass for the dead, not just during Lent and Easter. And a violet vestment can also be worn at any time during a mass for various needs or occasions, celebrations that have a penitential nature. A purple vestment could be worn. And again, the reason is that over all these years, the use of the liturgical colors, it draws our attention to the nature of the season. When we see violet or purple, we know that we're dealing with a penitential character. So why no flowers in the church? Why no decorations? That directive comes right out of the Roman Missal again as well. At the beginning of this section on Lent in the Missal, there's a few directives in general about the season of Lent, some things that we should or shouldn't be doing during the season. And the final one of those directions is, during Lent, it is not permitted to decorate the altar with flowers. So we get that directive right out of the Missal in our Lenten season. That one little first half of that sentence carries so much weight because we're so used to flowers and decorations. When we come to Mass, we come to celebrate. And we still continue to do that. But this is a reminder for us that we're pulling back during this season a little bit. This goes hand in hand with actually the rest of this sentence. The sentence begins, during Lent, it is not permitted to decorate the altar with flowers. And then the sentence finishes, and the use of musical instruments is allowed only to support the singing. This is one in the same directive. It's part of the same sentence. So both of these instructions are closely related, and it all goes hand in hand with the idea of us fasting and taking a step back during this season. Flowers are for celebrating. The flowers will come back at Easter. Generations and generations ago, there were no flowers to be had to decorate. It's mid-February right now. There's still snow on the ground. Generations ago, we didn't have FTD or 1-800-Flowers. We couldn't on-demand flowers, any kind of flowers we want at any time of year. So we look outside to nature as a sign of the season that we're in right now. Nothing's growing, nothing's blooming. We're going to wait till Easter to bring all that in. There are exceptions to this rule. We'll talk about that in a little bit. So nature is a reminder of no flowers. There's nothing blooming right now, at least in our northern hemisphere where we are. And then onto the music. The Missal doesn't say anything about making the music more solemn. As I said, the Missal simply states the use of musical instruments is only allowed to support the singing. Now, I could do a whole other workshop on the importance of singing at Mass, but for our couple minutes here, we need to understand that the most important music that happens at Mass is the music that is sung by the gathered assembly, the music that we all sing together. This is the most important chunk. Like I said, that's a whole other workshop. But for this purpose, remembering that liturgical music is sung by the assembly, with the exception that there's some duties that the cantor has to take care of. So if the gathered assembly's music is what's most important, then musical instruments are used only to support that singing. This also goes hand in hand with the idea of fasting and pulling back during the season. We don't want to overindulge. We're not going to do more than we need to. We're not going to show off how talented we are with a fancy postlude or prelude during Mass. We're not going to add a lot of music at the offertory if we don't need to, or cover time, that sort of a thing. We're going to pull back a little bit. Now, we don't get the directive that nothing actually tells us that the music needs to be more solemn. It just says that musical instruments are used to support the singing. It doesn't say anything about the music itself. So there's no directives there that say you must chant everything unaccompanied. You need to play everything a lot slower. You need to play everything in a minor key. Those directions aren't there. Although we've come into this practice over the years, we don't want to remove everything. We're going to pull back, we're going to fast, but this direction tells us that we're simply to support the singing with the musical instruments. And then, why are the statues covered? Why are images possibly covered in the church? Is there a church painting project going on that everything's covered? Actually, in the cathedral here last year, the building was being painted. So there were draperies everywhere, scaffolding everywhere. There was indeed a painting project going on, and this turned out very beautiful. Here we are a year later in a freshly painted, beautiful cathedral. But assuming there is no painting project going on in your church, again, back to the Missal and its official directives for us, the Missal tells us that on the 5th Sunday of Lent, in the Diocese of the United States, the practice of covering crosses and images throughout the church from this Sunday may be observed. So the current directive we have is not to cover crosses and images all during Lent, but to cover crosses and images from the 5th Sunday of Lent through Good Friday. Crosses remain covered until the end of the celebration of the Lord's Passion on Good Friday. So during the day on Holy Saturday, the crosses are uncovered. There's a few rituals. Morning prayer, the Liturgy of the Hours may happen in a church. There's preparation rites for folks who have been through the RCIA, the Rite of Christian Initiation of Adults, that happens on Holy Saturday. So during those prayers and those rituals, crosses are uncovered. And then the images, the statues or paintings that may have been covered, those will be uncovered right before the Easter Vigil. It's up to a bishop to decide if this practice is mandatory in his diocese. So currently in the Diocese of Camden, this is not a mandatory practice, but it is certainly something that can be done if a pastor decides to do it in his parish. This grew out of a few ancient practices that began in the Middle Ages of covering the altar. And then that grew into the practice of, on Ash Wednesday, covering the altar. And then this grew into a process of covering all the images in the church. And that tradition carried on through the years and grew and took some different forms. But our current directive is that the images and statues and the crosses may be covered from the 5th Sunday of Lent through till Good Friday, and the images before the Easter Vigil. One cross that shouldn't be covered in the church, though, would be the processional cross that's carried in procession. If that's covered from the 5th Sunday of Lent through Good Friday, then we're missing some of the directives that come along with Holy Week for our processional cross. On Palm Sunday, that processional cross could be decorated with palms. There's a directive for that in the Missal. And on Holy Thursday, there's a directive that the cross is used in the procession at the end of Mass. On Good Friday, the processional cross might want to be removed from the church so that that veiled cross isn't confused with the veiled cross that we're going to use during the veneration of the cross on Good Friday. And as far as using the color violet during Lent, on Good Friday, the cross that we will venerate, there's a directive there to actually cover that cross in the color violet. So when that cross is veiled and brought out, there's a purple or violet veil on that cross. That's showing us that the color violet is so important during this season that even amidst all of the red vestments and any possible red minimal decorations on Good Friday, that this veiled purple or violet cross is still what is processed in for us to venerate. I hope this helped answer some of the questions that you might have had about liturgy during the Lenten season.